Do you know anyone who wants a daughter? That was the question a barefoot little girl asked Damian Cross on the coldest night Chicago had seen in years. She stood beneath the golden lights of his private club, soaked by freezing rain, clutching a torn, stuffed fox like it was the last gentle thing left in her world. Behind her, a black sedan waited across the street. In front of her stood the man judges feared businessmen obeyed and enemies never crossed twice. She was not asking for money. She was asking whether there was still a place in this world where she could exist without being hurt. Stay with this story, because it is not only about danger power or a mafia king's revenge. It is about how trust is rebuilt when love has always come with a price. Like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. That question followed Damian through the glass doors. Do you know anyone who wants a daughter? It hung in the warm air of Nocturne while the winter storm pressed itself against the windows outside. The restaurant had been built to make powerful people feel untouchable. Gold light softened every face. Crystal glasses caught the glow of the chandeliers. A piano played quietly near the bar, each note smooth enough to hide the deals being made beneath it. Then Sophie Hale stepped onto the marble floor in bare feet, wrapped in Damian Cross's coat, and every illusion of comfort in the room became impossible to ignore. She stopped just beyond the entrance. Her toes were red from the cold. Dirt and melted snow gathered beneath them, leaving a faint mark on the pale stone. Sophie stared at it. Her face changed. I'm sorry. Damian turned toward her. For what? She pointed at the floor without lifting her hand all the way. I made it dirty. The nearest waiter looked down. A few drops of gray water had collected near the edge of the carpet. Damian had watched men beg for their lives without feeling anything. He had listened to liars invent dying mothers and sick children when debts came due. He knew fear when it wore expensive cologne. He knew fear when it carried a gun. This was different. Sophie was not afraid of punishment for doing something wrong. She was afraid of punishment for being present. The floor can be cleaned, Damian said. Her eyes rose carefully toward him. You won't be mad? No. She searched his face as if anger might still be waiting behind the word. Damian lowered his voice. No one here will be angry because you walked into a room. Claire Monroe stood beside the entrance, one hand resting on the open door. The freezing air moved through the space around her, pulling at the dark strands of hair near her cheek. She watched Sophie take one small step forward, then another. Sophie walked on the front of her feet, trying to leave as little of herself behind as possible. Claire closed the door. Warmth returned to the lobby, but Sophie continued shaking. The dining room noticed her slowly. At first, only the guests nearest the entrance turned their heads. Then the silence spread from table to table. A state senator lowered his wine glass. A woman in silver silk paused with a fork halfway to her mouth. Two men near the bar stopped speaking when they saw Damian walking beside a barefoot child. Nocturne's guests were accustomed to unusual sights. They had watched famous marriages collapse over dessert. They had seen men enter through the front door and leave through private exits after losing fortunes in whispered conversations. They understood that curiosity could become dangerous when Damian Cross was involved. Still, they looked. Sophie felt every pair of eyes. Her shoulders pulled inward. She pressed the stuffed fox harder against her chest and lowered her face until the torn ear brushed her chin. Damian shifted closer to her line of sight. You don't have to look at them. I know. Her voice was almost too quiet to hear. I know how not to bother people. Damian stopped walking. Claire stopped with him. Sophie took one more step before realizing they were no longer beside her. She turned. Damian's expression had gone still. The room felt the change, even if Sophie did not. You are not bothering anyone, he said. A man at a nearby table quickly looked away. Damian resumed walking. Claire moved ahead and opened a discreet door near the end of the dining room. It led into a service corridor lined with dark wood and brass lamps. The sound of the piano faded behind them, replaced by the rhythm of the kitchen beyond the walls. Pans struck metal, knives met cutting boards. Someone called for more herbs. The air smelled of butter, roasted garlic bread, and smoke. Sophie lifted her head slightly. Her eyes moved toward the kitchen door. Damian noticed. "When did you last eat?" She looked down again. "I'm not hungry." Claire glanced at him. The answer had come too quickly. Damian said nothing more as they crossed the corridor. Luke Mercer followed several steps behind, speaking quietly into his phone. He had already sent 2 men after the sedan. Another man was pulling security footage from every camera facing the street. Luke did not believe in coincidence. Neither did Damian. They reached a private elevator. Claire pressed the button. Sophie looked at the polished metal doors and moved closer to the wall. Damian saw the shift. "You don't like elevators?" She tightened her grip on the Fox. "I can use it." That wasn't the question. Sophie looked at him. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Claire crouched a few feet away. "There are stairs," she said. "They are warmer than the elevator, and we can leave every door open." Sophie looked toward the hallway behind them. "Can we take the stairs?" "Yes," Claire said. Damian did not question the choice. They climbed slowly. Sophie held the railing without wrapping her fingers fully around it. Her bare feet made almost no sound against the carpeted steps. By the second floor, she was breathing too hard for such a small climb. Damian slowed his pace. She noticed. "You don't have to wait for me." "I'm not waiting." "You stopped. So did you." Sophie studied him, unsure whether he was making fun of her. Damian looked toward the landing. "I prefer stairs." Claire's mouth shifted slightly, though she did not smile. Damian hated stairs. He considered them narrow, inefficient, and difficult to secure. Sophie nodded as if his answer made sense. They continued upward. The private suite occupied the quietest corner of the 3rd floor. Claire opened the door and turned on the lamps one at a time. Warm, amber light filled the sitting room. There was a cream-colored sofa near a glass fireplace, 2 low chairs, a walnut table, and a bedroom visible through an open doorway. The blankets had already been turned down. Beyond another door, pale stone reflected the light of the bathroom. Sophie remained in the hallway. She stared into the room. Damian had seen that expression before. Not wonder, not greed. It was the look of someone who had entered a place too beautiful to belong to them. Claire stepped inside first. "You can leave the door open." Sophie looked at the handle. "It doesn't lock from the outside." "No." "Are you sure?" Claire walked to the door and turned the lock slowly. "It locks from inside. Only if you choose." Sophie looked at Damian. He nodded. She stepped into the suite. A plate of fresh rolls sat on the table beside a glass bottle of water. Sophie saw the bread immediately. Her eyes stayed on it for less than a second. Then she looked toward the fireplace. Damian removed his jacket and placed it over the back of a chair. Without the wool coat, Sophie looked even smaller. The black fabric swallowed her shoulders and trailed behind her like a blanket. Claire moved toward the sofa. "You can sit here." Sophie did not move. "It's clean." Claire paused. "Yes, I might ruin it." Damian crossed to the chair opposite the sofa and sat down. "It has survived drunk politicians." Claire gave him a look. Sophie's brow tightened. "What's a politician?" "A person who ruins expensive furniture," Damian said. Claire looked away to hide the beginning of a smile. Sophie stared at the sofa again. Then she sat on the very edge. Her spine remained straight. Her feet did not touch the floor. She held June between her knees, both hands wrapped around the stuffed fox. Damian rested one forearm on his thigh. Claire stayed near the door, giving Sophie space. The child's eyes moved toward the bread again. Damian reached for one of the rolls. Sophie followed his hand. He tore off a piece, ate it, and placed the rest on a small plate. "Not poisoned," he said. Sophie looked at him with complete seriousness. Why would it be poisoned? Claire closed her eyes briefly. Damian considered the question. It wouldn't. Then why did you check I didn't? Sophie's attention remained on the bread. Damian slid the plate toward the middle of the table. Take it. She did not move. Do I have to finish it? No. Can I keep some? There will be more. That wasn't what I asked. Damian looked at her. For the first time there was something beneath her fear. A quiet insistence. A need to make the rules clear before trusting them. He nodded. You can keep whatever you don't eat. Sophie slid from the sofa. She approached the table slowly and took the roll with both hands. She did not bite it immediately. She held it near her chest as if waiting for someone to change the decision. Damian leaned back in the chair. No one spoke. Sophie took a small bite. She chewed carefully. Then another. Her eyes closed for half a second. Claire turned towards the window, giving her privacy. Sophie ate half the roll and stopped. She wrapped the remainder in the cloth napkin beneath the plate, then slipped it inside the pocket of Damian's coat. She looked up quickly. Damian kept his expression unchanged. Claire had seen it too. Neither of them mentioned it. A knock sounded at the door. Sophie recoiled so sharply that the back of her knees struck the sofa. The bread disappeared deeper into the coat pocket. Damian rose. It's the doctor. Sophie's face emptied. I'm not sick. She checks people who are cold. I'm warm now. Damian stayed where he was. You don't have to let her touch you. Claire opened the door only a few inches. Dr. Maya Bennett stood in the hallway carrying a leather medical bag. Rain had dampened the curls around her face. She looked past Claire and saw Sophie pressed against the sofa. Maya did not enter. May I come in? Sophie looked at Damian. He answered without speaking. The choice was hers. After several seconds, Sophie nodded. Maya stepped inside and placed her bag near the door. She looked at the stuffed fox. That is a serious-looking animal. Sophie's arms tightened around it. Her name is June. Maya sat on the floor. June looks like she has been through a lot. Sophie glanced at the torn ear. She doesn't like strangers. That makes sense. Maya opened the medical bag but did not remove anything. My name is Maya. I am a doctor, but I am not going to do anything until you say it is all right. Sophie watched her hands. Do I have to take off my clothes? Claire's breath caught. Maya kept her voice calm. No. We can start with your feet. We can stop whenever you want. Sophie looked toward Damian again. He lowered himself into the chair. I'm staying, even if it takes a long time. Yes, even if I'm difficult. Damian's face hardened, but his voice did not. You are not difficult. Sophie looked at the floor. People say I am. People say many stupid things. Claire folded her arms. Damian. He looked at her. What? Try not to teach her your entire vocabulary tonight. For the briefest instant, Sophie looked from one adult to the other with something close to curiosity. Maya noticed. Can I see your left foot? Sophie hesitated. Then she lifted it slightly. Maya moved closer but stopped before touching her. May I hold your ankle? A long pause. Yes. Maya's fingers were gentle. Sophie flinched anyway. The skin on her feet was raw and beginning to swell. Several cuts ran along the sole. One toe had turned a troubling shade beneath the dirt. Maya asked Claire for warm water and clean towels. Claire left the room. Sophie watched the doorway until she returned. Maya warmed the feet slowly. As sensation returned, Sophie bit down on her lower lip. It hurts, Maya said. Sophie shook her head. It's fine. You are allowed to say it hurts. Sophie did not answer. Maya dried one foot and examined the other. Then she looked toward Damian. The look was brief. It carried enough concern to sharpen the room. Can I check your breathing? Sophie gripped June. "What do I have to do?" "Nothing. I will place this against your back." Maya held up the stethoscope. Sophie stared at the silver disc. "Is it cold?" "A little." Sophie looked at Damian. He stood and crossed halfway toward the sofa before lowering himself to one knee. He remained several feet away. "Nothing happens unless you agree," he said. Her eyes fixed on him. "Will you stay there?" "Yes." "Till she's done, yes." Maya waited. Sophie finally nodded. Claire helped move the heavy coat from one shoulder. The borrowed shirt beneath it was thin and stained. When the fabric shifted, bruises appeared along Sophie's upper arm. Not one bruise, several, some dark purple, some yellow, some nearly faded. Finger marks circled the narrow bone. Claire became very still. Maya placed the stethoscope against Sophie's back. Sophie's breath caught. Slowly, Maya said, "You are doing fine." The examination continued in careful pieces. Every question required permission. Every touch required time. Maya found an old burn on the inside of Sophie's forearm. Another mark lay higher beneath the sleeve. A ridge along her rib suggested a fracture that had healed without treatment. Thin scars crossed her lower back. Sophie's eyes remained on Damian. When Maya pressed lightly near her left side, Sophie jerked. A small sound escaped her before she swallowed it. Damian's hands closed into fists. Claire noticed. She stepped closer to him and lowered her voice. "Do not frighten her. I'm not moving. She can see your face." Damian looked away. The effort cost him more than Claire could know. Maya finished checking Sophie's pulse and eyes. She gently examined the damaged nail on one hand, then covered Sophie's shoulders again. "You did very well." Sophie's expression tightened. "Does that mean I can stay?" Maya looked at Damian. Damian answered. "You were staying before the examination." Sophie stared at him. "Even if I was bad, you were not bad. What if I had said no?" Then she would have stopped. Sophie looked at Maya. Maya nodded. Sophie lowered her face into June's fur. She seemed to be hiding from something more painful than the examination itself, the possibility that no had been allowed. Claire led Maya into the hallway. Damian followed after telling Sophie he would remain just outside the open door. Luke stood near the elevator with his phone in one hand. Maya removed her glasses. "She needs a hospital." Damian looked toward the suite. "Can she be treated here tonight?" "For the cold injury, yes. For everything else, she needs imaging blood work and a proper nutritional plan." How bad Maya put her glasses back on. Severe malnutrition, early frost injury, multiple injuries in different stages of healing, at least one untreated fracture, burns, repeated trauma. Claire's face had lost its color. "This was not one bad night," Maya continued. "Someone has been hurting her for a long time." Damian did not move. His stillness changed the temperature of the hallway. Luke watched him carefully. Maya lowered her voice. "She expects violence before it happens. Her body is preparing for punishment every time an adult changes position. She apologizes before asking for anything. She hides food. She is trying to make herself invisible." Damian looked through the open doorway. Sophie sat on the sofa, arranging the torn ear of her fox between two fingers. What does she need right now? Warmth? Small portions of food? Sleep? Medical care? A safe adult? More than one, preferably. She has them. Maya's gaze sharpened. She also needs child protective services. Damian looked at her. No uniforms tonight. Claire turned toward him. "You cannot keep an unidentified child hidden in a private suite. I can keep her alive. That is not enough. It is more than whoever had her managed." Claire stepped closer. "This is not one of your businesses. You cannot move her into a protected room and decide the matter is settled." Damian's voice lowered. Someone watched the building after she arrived. That makes documentation more important. It makes secrecy important. No, it makes careful procedure important. Damian's gaze hardened. Luke shifted his weight, but Claire did not step back. She had stood across tables from men who threatened witnesses. She had questioned officers who lied beneath oath. Damian's anger did not frighten her. Not because he was harmless. Because she knew exactly how dangerous he could be. "You want to protect her," Claire said. "Then stop thinking like someone defending territory." Damian's jaw tightened. "She is not territory. Then give her choices. I gave her a room. You gave her a command. I brought her inside. You decided for her. She was freezing, and you were right to act. That does not mean you get to own every decision after that." The word own struck him. He looked through the doorway again. Sophie had moved to the edge of the sofa. Her head was tilted toward the hallway. She could hear them. Damian lowered his voice further. "What do you suggest?" Claire did not answer immediately. The question itself surprised her. "Judge Allison Grant," she said. "She handles emergency child protection orders. Quietly. She understands cases involving organized threats. We document everything tonight. Maya files the medical report. I contact Grant directly. No public intake center, no marked vehicles, no address attached to Sophie's name." Damian looked at Maya. "Can you treat her here until morning?" "Yes, but I want imaging within 12 hours. You will have it." Claire held his gaze. "And no one questions Sophie tonight." Damian nodded. Luke ended the call in his hand. "I have the sedan." Every face turned toward him. "Stolen outside Milwaukee 2 days ago. Traffic cameras caught it entering Chicago this afternoon. It circled Nocturne twice before stopping across the street." Driver Damian asked. "Couldn't see the face. Find the route. Already working on it." Luke looked toward Sophie's room. No missing person report under Sophie Hale in Illinois or Wisconsin. Claire frowned. "She may have given us a false name." Damian shook his head. "She did not." "You cannot know that." "I know." Claire studied him, then let the argument go. Luke continued. "I'm checking school records, guardianship files, recent deaths involving parents, and bus terminal footage." Damian nodded. "I want every camera between here and the Milwaukee line. That is several thousand cameras. Then start with the ones that work." Luke almost smiled. Almost. Maya returned to the suite with ointment and medicine. Claire went downstairs to contact the judge. Damian remained. Sophie had not moved far. She watched him enter. "Are they mad?" "No. You sounded mad." "I was." Her grip tightened around June. At me, Damian crossed to the chair and sat. "No." She watched him carefully. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Sophie looked toward the bathroom. Claire had left clean clothes on a stool near the door. A small shirt, drawstring pants, socks, and a folded towel. "You can wash if you want," Damian said. "Do I have to?" "No." "Will someone watch?" "No." "Will the door lock only from inside?" Sophie considered the room. "Can someone stand outside?" "Yes." "Not a man." Damian nodded. "Claire will." Sophie looked at him. "You won't be mad?" "No." He called Claire. She returned within minutes and stood outside the bathroom while Sophie went in carrying June and the clean clothes. The door remained open a few inches. Water ran, stopped, ran again. Damian sat near the fireplace. Claire leaned against the wall. Neither spoke until the sound of water steadied. Then Claire said quietly, "You cannot threaten every person who makes her afraid. I can threaten the ones who deserve it. And how will you know the difference I usually do?" That is not an answer. Damian looked at her. "You think I am going to hurt her?" "No." The certainty in her voice surprised him. Claire continued, I think you will destroy half the city trying to make sure no one else does. He looked toward the bathroom. Would that be so terrible? Yes. Damian turned back to her. Claire's expression softened, but only slightly. Because children do not need to grow up inside someone else's war. Before he could answer, the bathroom door opened. Sophie stepped out wearing clothes several sizes too large. Her wet hair hung unevenly around her face. Without the dirt, the hollowness beneath her cheekbones looked sharper. The bruising beneath one eye had darkened. She stopped when she saw Damian. You stayed. I said I would. Sophie stood still, absorbing the fact. Claire moved toward her. Would you like the bed or the sofa? Sophie looked into the bedroom. The blankets were smooth. The pillows had been arranged neatly. A lamp glowed beside the headboard. Her breathing changed. The floor. Claire glanced at Damian. He answered before she could. You can sleep wherever you feel safe. Sophie crossed to the corner between the sofa and the wall. She lowered herself onto the carpet with her back protected and the open door directly in view. Damian understood the choice. Claire brought a tray of broth toast and sliced banana. She placed it on the table. Sophie looked at the distance between the food and the corner. Damian moved the tray within reach, then stepped away. For me? Sophie asked. Yes. Do I have to finish it? No. She picked up the spoon. Each bite was tiny, measured, controlled. Halfway through, her eyelids began to lower. The spoon slipped from her fingers and touched the edge of the bowl with a soft sound. Sophie jerked awake. I'm sorry. Damian sat down across from her. You did nothing wrong. I almost spilled it. You didn't. But I could have. The bowl can be cleaned. She looked at him. The floor, too. Yes. The sofa. Yes. What if something breaks? Damian leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. Things are replaceable. Sophie's eyes moved across the expensive room. All things, most. What isn't? Damian's answer came quietly. People. Sophie stared at him for a long time. Then she returned the spoon to the bowl. She ate 3 more bites before setting it down. Claire dimmed the lamps. Maya left instructions for the night and promised to return before dawn. Luke stationed 2 trusted men at the stairwell and another near the elevator. No one entered without Claire's approval. Sophie curled into the corner beneath Damian's coat. June rested under her chin. Her eyes remained open. Damian stood near the door. Try to sleep. Are you leaving? I'll be outside. She looked toward the hallway. How far on the other side of the door? Will it be open? As much as you want. Sophie considered this. Just a little. Damian left a narrow space between the door and the frame. He dragged a chair from the hallway and placed it outside. Claire appeared carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him and sat in the chair opposite. For a while, neither of them spoke. The restaurant settled beneath them. Glassware was cleared. The kitchen fires were extinguished one by one. The final guests left through the front entrance beneath umbrellas held by silent drivers. Outside, snow began to replace the rain. Claire looked at Damian over the rim of her cup. You should sleep. So should you. I'm not the one using a hallway chair as a security strategy. It has a clear view of the stairs. It also has terrible lumbar support. Damian looked toward the strip of light beneath Sophie's door. Claire's voice softened. You cannot save your sister by saving this child. His hand tightened around the coffee. I know. No, Claire said. You know the words. Damian looked at her. The corridor was quiet enough for him to hear the heat moving through the walls. Claire held his gaze. Sophie is not Lila. I know. She cannot become your punishment. Damian looked down at the cup in his hands. For several seconds he said nothing. Then a sound came from inside the suite. A small cry, broken off too quickly. Damian was out of the chair before the cup touched the floor. The scream tore through the room. Damian crossed the suite in 3 strides, then stopped himself before reaching the corner. Sophie was beneath the writing desk. Her knees were pressed against her chest. June was trapped beneath one arm, crushed so tightly that the stuffed fox had nearly folded in half. The lamp beside the bed had fallen onto the carpet, throwing a crooked beam across the wall. "No," Sophie gasped. "Please. I'll be quiet. I'll be good." Damian lowered himself to the floor. "Sophie." She did not hear him. Her eyes were open, but she was somewhere far below Nocturne, somewhere without windows or warm lamps. "Please don't put me downstairs." Claire entered behind him and stopped near the doorway. Damian kept his hands visible. "Sophie, listen to my voice." She rocked forward and back. "I didn't mean to wake anybody. I promise I won't scream again." "You are in Chicago," Damian said. "You are at Nocturne." Her breathing remained shallow and quick. "There is a lamp near the bed. Claire is standing by the door. Your red boots are beside the sofa." Sophie's eyes moved slightly. "June is in your arms." Her fingers tightened around the fox. "The bathroom light is on. The door is open. No one locked it." The rocking slowed. Damian stayed where he was. "You are not in the basement." Sophie blinked. Her gaze found the lamp on the floor, then the open bedroom door, then Claire. Finally, she looked at Damian. Her face collapsed with shame. "I screamed. I heard you. I woke everyone." Everyone was already awake. Claire glanced at him. That was not true, but it was kind. Sophie pressed her mouth against June's worn fur. "Are you mad?" "No. You look mad. Not at you." She searched his face. Damian deliberately opened his hands. Claire walked to the wall and turned on every light in the suite. Warm gold filled the bedroom, the sitting room, and the bathroom. There was nowhere left for darkness to collect. Sophie looked around as if seeing the room for the first time. Damian shifted until his back rested against the wall. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Sitting. Why?" "Because you are awake." Sophie looked at the bed. "I can sleep there." "You do not have to." "I should." Damian shook his head. "There is no should tonight." Claire brought a blanket and placed it within Sophie's reach. She did not try to cover her. Sophie pulled it over her knees. Her body remained tense, but the panic had begun to release its grip. Claire sat near the doorway. Damian stayed against the wall. Minutes passed. The building became quiet again. Sophie's breathing slowly deepened. Her head lowered against her knees. At some point, she moved from beneath the desk and settled near Damian, leaving several inches between them. Her hand found the edge of his sleeve. Damian did not move. When morning light finally touched the windows, Sophie was asleep with her fingers still closed around him. Claire watched them from the doorway. She had known Damian for 8 years. She had seen blood on his cuffs. She had watched him walk into rooms where armed men were waiting and leave without a mark on him. She had heard politicians lower their voices when he entered. She had never seen him remain still for 6 hours because a child was holding his sleeve. Sophie woke shortly after sunrise. For several seconds, she did not remember where she was. Then she looked at Damian. "You stayed." His voice was quiet from exhaustion. "I said I would." Sophie looked at the place where her hand held his sleeve. She released him quickly. "Sorry." Damian stood with care, stretching the stiffness from his back. "You do not need to apologize for holding on." Sophie lowered her eyes. Claire walked toward the bathroom. "I'll run warm water for your feet." Sophie looked at her. "Are you staying too?" Claire smiled gently. "For breakfast." Sophie considered that answer. Then she nodded. By 7 that morning, the kitchen at Nocturne had begun to wake. Hank Romano arrived carrying a paper cup of coffee and complaining about the quality of produce deliveries before he had even removed his coat. He was broad through the shoulders and thicker through the middle with silver hair and hands shaped by 40 years of knives' heat and heavy pans. He entered through the rear door, turned toward the pantry, and stopped. Sophie sat on a low stool near the wall. Damian's coat still covered most of her body. Her red boots stood beside her, but she had not put them on. June rested in her lap. She had positioned herself close to the trash bins. Hank looked at the bins, then at Sophie. He said nothing about either. Instead, he washed his hands, took eggs from the cooler, and set a pan over a low flame. Butter began to melt. Sophie watched every movement. Hank cracked 2 eggs into a bowl. "You know anything about breakfast?" Sophie looked at the floor. "No." "Good. People who think they understand breakfast usually ruin it." He whisked the eggs. Sophie glanced toward the rear door. Hank noticed. "You planning to escape before the toast?" She stiffened. He immediately turned back to the stove. "Bad joke," he said. "Forget I said it." Sophie studied him. Adults did not often admit mistakes in her experience. Hank poured the eggs into the pan. The smell of butter filled the room. He toasted 2 slices of bread, cut a banana, and divided everything between 2 plates. Then he sat on an overturned crate several feet away. He took a bite from one plate. "Needs salt." He added salt. Sophie looked at the other plate. Hank continued eating. "That one is not mine." Sophie said nothing. "It will become cold and insulting if no one helps it." Her eyes moved toward him. "Food can be insulted. In my kitchen, everything has feelings." She slipped from the stool. Hank kept his attention on his own plate. Sophie approached the work table and picked up the fork. She ate standing. Her bites were small and carefully measured. After a few minutes, she wrapped half the toast in a napkin and placed it inside Damian's coat. Hank saw. He turned toward the stove. "That pan is looking at me wrong." Sophie looked at the pan. "It doesn't have eyes. That is what makes it suspicious." A small sound escaped her. Not a laugh, not yet, but close. The kitchen became part of Sophie's mornings. She appeared before the dining room opened, usually sitting on the same stool beside the pantry. Hank never asked why she came so early. He gave her simple tasks. At first, she only watched him knead dough. Then he let her sprinkle flour across the counter. She used too much. A white cloud rose between them. Sophie froze. Her eyes moved to Hank's face. He looked at the counter. Then he dipped both hands into the flour and pressed them against his black apron. "There," he said. "Now it looks intentional." Sophie stared at the white prints. Hank held out one flour-covered hand. After a moment, she pressed her palm against his. The difference in size made him look away. Another morning, he taught her how to crack an egg. The shell broke badly. Half of it fell into the bowl. Sophie stopped breathing. Hank reached into the mixture and removed the shell. "First egg always fights back. You're not mad I have broken more eggs than you have seen." "How many thousands?" "That sounds wasteful." Hank gave her a wounded look. Sophie smiled before she could stop herself. The expression vanished quickly, but Hank had seen it. He did not comment. Claire's care came in quieter forms. She brought books to the 3rd floor and placed them beside the lamp. She found clothes that fit without making Sophie feel as if she were being dressed for display. She bought a hairbrush with soft bristles shampoo that did not sting and a set of colored pencils. Sophie touched the yellow pencil first. Claire sat beside her at the small table. "Do you know how to write your name?" Sophie nodded. She pressed the pencil so hard against the paper that the point broke. Her entire body tightened. Claire reached for the sharpener, then stopped. "May I?" Sophie looked at her. Claire pointed to the broken pencil. "May I fix it?" After a pause, Sophie nodded. Claire sharpened the pencil and placed it back on the table. "No punishment?" Sophie asked. For breaking a pencil. Sophie lowered her voice. Things cost money. Yes. I shouldn't waste them. Using something is not wasting it. Sophie looked at the blank paper. Claire picked up a blue pencil and drew a crooked square. This is a terrible house. Sophie examined it. It needs a roof. Claire added a roof. It still looks bad. It needs windows. Claire drew 2 uneven windows. Sophie reached for the yellow pencil. She drew light inside them. Claire watched her face. What is this place? Sophie did not answer. She colored the windows until the yellow became deep and bright. The red boots became another test. Claire placed them beside Sophie's chair one afternoon. Sophie stared at them for nearly a minute. They are yours, Claire said. Sophie looked up. For here. For anywhere. What if I leave? They leave with you. What if I get them dirty, then we clean them? What if I grow? Then we buy another pair. Sophie's eyes narrowed with uncertainty. For always, Claire had spent years keeping her feelings arranged behind a calm expression. That question broke through every layer. Yes, she said, for always. Sophie put them on and walked around the room as if the floor might reject her. Later that day, she spilled water near the sofa. I'm sorry, she said immediately. Claire picked up a towel. You do not need to apologize for existing in a room. Her tone came out sharper than she intended. Sophie flinched. Claire stopped. She lowered herself to one knee. I'm sorry. Sophie looked confused. Claire continued. I was trying to help, but I sounded angry. Adults can say sorry they should when they hurt someone. Sophie watched her wipe the water. Does Damian say sorry? Claire glanced toward the open office door. Not often enough. Damian's voice came from inside. I heard that. Claire did not raise hers. You were meant to. Sophie looked between them. For the first time, she saw disagreement without danger. Luke Mercer took longer. His height made him frightening. His scarred hands made Sophie watch every movement. He understood quickly that reassurance only made her more suspicious, so he stopped trying to be reassuring. He became predictable. He knocked before entering. He announced himself in hallways. If he needed to pass behind her in the kitchen, he always said the same words. Behind you, Sophie. He never reached over her. He never stood between her and a door. One afternoon, Sophie sat in Damian's office coloring while Damian and Luke discussed a shipping company near the river. A yellow pencil rolled beneath the desk. Sophie leaned down to search for it. Luke saw it first and reached beneath the desk. She recoiled. Luke froze with the pencil between 2 scarred fingers. The room went silent. He lowered his hand and placed the pencil on the carpet. Yellow, he said. Sophie looked at the pencil, then at him. Luke stepped back. She picked it up. The next morning, he left a new box of pencils beside her stool in the kitchen. There was no note. Sophie carried the box into Damian's office. Did Luke buy these? Yes. Why, he noticed you needed them. Does he want me to thank him? No. Should I? Only if you want to. Sophie looked through the office door. Luke stood in the corridor speaking on his phone. She walked toward him. He saw her and ended the call. Thank you for the colors. Luke nodded. You are welcome. She started to leave. Wait, Luke said. Sophie stopped. He held out one hand. Not toward her. Just in the open space between them. This is a secret handshake. She looked at his palm. What makes it secret? No one else knows it. You know it. That makes 2 of us. He demonstrated a high touch, 2 knuckle taps, and a strange movement of the fingers. Sophie attempted it. She missed the second tap. Luke shook his head. Terrible. She frowned and tried again. On the 4th attempt, she completed the motion. Luke made a ridiculous clicking sound with his tongue. Sophie blinked. Then she laughed. The sound stopped the kitchen. Hank looked up from the stove. Claire paused in the doorway. Damian stood inside his office with a phone near his ear. Sophie covered her mouth, startled by herself. Luke lowered his voice. "Do not tell anyone." She nodded solemnly. "Secret." That afternoon, Damian found Claire in the dining room before service. She was reviewing invoices near the windows. Snow moved beyond the glass, softening the city into gray and white. "You smiled today," she said without looking up. "I do that." "No." Damian stopped beside the table. Claire turned a page. "You show your teeth when someone has made a mistake. It is not the same thing." He looked toward the kitchen door. She laughed. "I heard." Damian's expression softened. Claire closed the folder. "What happened to Lila?" His face changed immediately. She had asked before. He had never answered. Claire stood. "You told Sophie she did not have to speak before she was ready. I am not forcing you. Then why ask? Because she is reaching a place in you that has been locked for 22 years. Damian looked toward the windows. The river moved below them, dark beneath the winter sky. "I was 17, he said. Claire remained still. "My father sent me to deliver a package at Union Station. Lila came with me because there was no one else." "How old was she, 11? Damian placed one hand against the back of a chair. "A man followed us onto the platform, then another. They were working for someone my father had crossed." Claire waited. "One of them attacked me. I held Lila's hand while I fought him." His voice became quieter. "The train doors opened. People pushed around us. Someone pulled her from the other side." Claire saw the memory move across his face. "I held on," he said. "Then I didn't." "Damian," I heard her scream. The doors closed. The train moved. Claire stepped closer. "I searched every station, every hospital, every building connected to that crew. My father told me she was dead and that it was my fault. You were a child. I was old enough to hold on." "You were a child," Claire repeated. Damian looked at her. "I built everything after that because I wanted enough power to find anyone." Claire's voice softened. "But you built it too late." "Yes." They stood near each other in the empty dining room. Claire lifted her hand as if she might touch his face. She stopped. "Sophie is not Lila. I know. She cannot become a way to punish yourself." Damian's eyes held hers. "What if she becomes my reason?" Claire's breath caught. The space between them narrowed. Damian reached toward a loose strand of hair near her cheek. Before his fingers touched it, the service door opened. Hank appeared carrying a tray. "If the two of you are planning to stare at each other all day, do it somewhere that does not block lunch." Claire stepped back. Damian looked at him. Hank continued walking. "I am old, not blind." 2 days later, Sophie entered Damian's office alone. She stood just inside the door with June pressed against her ribs. Damian looked up from the papers in front of him. Claire sat at the side table reviewing a legal filing. "Can I come in?" Sophie asked. "You are already in." Her face changed. Damian set down his pen. "Yes. Come in." Sophie crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite his desk. She twisted June's torn ear around one finger. Claire began gathering her papers. Sophie looked at her. "You can stay." Claire stopped. "Are you sure?" Sophie nodded. Claire returned to her chair. Damian waited. Sophie looked down at June. "My mom's name was Rachel." Neither adult interrupted. "She died when I was born." Sophie rubbed the worn fabric between her fingers. "People said it wasn't my fault. But if I wasn't born, she wouldn't have died." Damian's jaw tightened. "Your birth did not kill your mother." Sophie looked at him. "You don't know." "No," he said. "But I know children are not responsible for what happens to adults." She looked down again. My dad said she picked June before I was born. He said she wanted me to have something soft. Claire lowered her eyes. What was your father's name? She asked. Daniel Hale. Sophie's voice changed when she said it. There was pain in it, but also warmth. He fixed cranes, the big ones near the water. She explained that Daniel had raised her alone. He made pancakes badly and sang in the car even though he could not sing. He let Sophie sleep beside him during storms. He told her stories about Rachel and promised that June had once been perfect. Then a cable snapped at a work site. A woman came to the house. After that, Sophie went to live with her Aunt Marissa. At first she was nice, Sophie said. She made soup. She let me have the room with the window. Damian remained motionless. Then Wade came. Claire's hand tightened around her pen. He smiled a lot when other people were there. Sophie continued. He brought flowers. He called me sweetheart. Her voice flattened. After he moved in, he started making rules. What rules? Claire asked gently. Sophie stared at the desk. I had to wait until he finished eating. I couldn't walk in front of the television. I couldn't ask Aunt Marissa questions when he was tired. I couldn't close my bedroom door. She swallowed. If I forgot, he put me downstairs. Damian's hands remained flat on the desk. The basement, he asked. Sophie nodded. No windows, just pipes. She tightened her grip on June. He turned off the light when he left. At first I screamed. Then he said every time I screamed I had to stay longer. Her voice dropped. So I learned not to. Claire's eyes shone. Sophie continued in the same calm tone. If I ate too fast, I was greedy. If I ate too slow, I was wasting food. If I left crumbs, I had to sleep downstairs. If I cried, he used cigarettes. Damian looked toward the window. Chicago spread beyond the glass, full of people moving through an ordinary afternoon. His reflection looked like a stranger. What did your aunt do? Claire asked. Sophie's mouth trembled. She put medicine on me sometimes. Did she know Wade was hurting you? Yes. Did she try to stop him? Sophie shook her head. She said he was under stress. She said I had to be more careful. Damian's fingers curled once against the desk. Claire watched him. Why did you leave that night? She asked. Sophie looked at Damian. Wade lost money. The room became still. He was yelling at Aunt Marissa. He said I cost too much. She said the checks were supposed to pay for me. Sophie's breathing became shallow. Then he said he knew people who would pay more. Damian's eyes sharpened. What people I don't know? What exactly did he say? Claire looked at him. Damian. Sophie answered before Claire could stop her. He said I was young enough. He said my face was still clean enough. Silence filled the office. Sophie hurried on, afraid of what the silence meant. I waited until he fell asleep. I got June from behind the furnace pipe. My shoes were gone because Wade said I hadn't earned new ones. She climbed through the basement window. She walked until she reached a bus station. A driver left the luggage door open while loading bags. Sophie hid inside until someone shouted, then climbed out and slipped onto another bus behind a family. She did not know where it was going. It went to Chicago. For 2 nights, she slept near loading docks and searched trash bins for food. People saw me, she said. Her eyes filled. Some told me to move, some looked away. Then she saw Nocturne. The windows were warm. Her voice cracked. Everybody inside looked like they belonged somewhere. Sophie lowered her face. I thought maybe rich people knew someone who had room. A tear fell onto June's torn ear. I'm sorry I came here. Damian stood. Sophie flinched. He stopped immediately. Then he walked around the desk slowly and lowered himself onto one knee. Sophie held her breath. Damian opened his arms. He did not reach for her. He only waited. Sophie stared at him. Then she moved. Her body struck his chest with more force than he expected. Her hands closed in the back of his shirt. Damian held her carefully, one hand between her shoulders, the other against the back of her head. "You came to the right place," he said. Sophie trembled against him. "He will find me." He already looked. She pulled back enough to see his face. "You know I know someone was watching the building." Fear widened her eyes. Damian kept his voice even. "He will not touch you again. You can't promise that." "Yes," he said. "I can." "What if he has papers?" "Claire knows what to do with papers." Sophie looked toward her. Claire nodded. "What if he brings police?" "Then they speak to me," Claire said. Sophie looked back at Damian. "What if they make you give me back?" Damian's face became still. "No one will make me give you back." Her lower lip trembled. "Can I stay here?" "Yes." "For how long?" Damian looked across the room at Claire. She understood the weight of the answer. "As long as you need." Sophie pressed her face against his shoulder. Damian held her until the trembling eased. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the chair near the fire, Claire closed the office door. "You cannot promise forever without understanding what forever asks from you." Damian looked at Sophie. "I understand protection." "No. You understand control." His gaze moved to Claire. "She will not be easy every day," Claire said. "She may lie. She may steal food. She may run. She may hate you because someone else hurt her." "I can handle hate." Claire stepped closer. "Can you handle love?" Damian said nothing. "Love does not follow orders," she continued. "It does not stay inside boundaries because you build stronger walls." Damian looked down at her. "You think I do not know that I think you have spent your life avoiding the proof." The room narrowed around them. Damian lifted one hand. This time his fingers touched the loose strand of hair near Claire's cheek. She did not move away. His thumb brushed her skin. Claire's breath changed. Their faces drew closer. A knock struck the office door. Damian closed his eyes. Claire stepped back. Luke entered carrying a photograph. "I found him." He placed the image on the desk. Wade Kessler stood outside a gas station near the Wisconsin border. Behind him was the same dark sedan that had watched Nocturne on Sophie's first night. Damian looked at the photograph. Then he looked toward the sleeping child beside the fire. His voice became cold. "Bring me everything." Luke gave one short nod and left the office with the photograph. Damian remained beside the desk, one hand resting against the polished wood, his eyes fixed on Wade Kessler's face. The man in the image wore a clean coat and an easy smile. He looked like the kind of person neighbors trusted with spare keys. The kind of man who waved from driveways, remembered birthdays, and knew exactly when to lower his voice around strangers. Claire stood across from Damian. "You cannot let Sophie see that photograph. She has already seen worse. That does not mean she should see him here." Damian looked toward the chair near the fire. Sophie was still asleep, curled beneath a blanket with June pressed to her chest. Her breathing remained uneven, as if part of her body had not accepted that the room was safe. "He knows where she is," Damian said. "Yes." He watched the building. "Yes. He sent someone before he came himself." Claire's expression sharpened. "We do not know that yet." "I do. You suspect it." Damian looked at her. Claire held his gaze. "That distinction matters. It matters in court. It matters everywhere." Damian glanced toward Sophie again. "Not to her." Claire softened her voice. "It will. One day." Damian said nothing. For the rest of that afternoon, Nocturne changed without appearing to change. Guests continued arriving beneath the black awning. Wine was poured. Plates moved through the dining room. The piano played near the bar. Outside, snow pressed against the windows and gathered along the curb. Inside, Luke tightened the building one quiet measure at a time. 2 men took positions near the service entrance. Another watched the alley. Every vehicle passing the front doors was photographed. The private elevator required 2 keys instead of 1. Staff were told that Sophie was never to be left alone, but no one was allowed to make her feel followed. Damian moved through the restaurant as if the city had not shifted beneath his feet. Sophie stayed near Hank. That evening, she stood on a stool in the kitchen, wearing a blue apron folded twice around her waist. Flour dusted her sleeves. Hank was showing her how to shape small pieces of dough into shells. "Not too hard," he said. "Pasta remembers fear." Sophie looked at him. "Pasta has feelings, too. Everything in this kitchen has feelings. You said pans were suspicious. They are suspicious because they have feelings." Sophie pressed one piece of dough beneath her thumb. It flattened badly. Hank examined it. "This one looks like Illinois." Sophie frowned. "Illinois does not look like that." "You are 7. How many maps have you studied?" 3. Hank blinked. "Of course you have." Sophie reached for another piece. Damian watched from the kitchen doorway. Claire stood beside him holding a folder. "She is calmer here," she said. "Hank makes too much noise for anyone to think." "That may be why." Damian looked at Sophie. She was listening to Hank argue with a bowl. Her shoulders were lower than they had been a week earlier. Claire opened the folder. Luke found guardianship records. Damian turned. Marissa Hale became Sophie's legal guardian 2 years ago. Wade married her 8 months later, and the father, Daniel Hale, died in an industrial accident near Milwaukee. Sophie told the truth about that. She told the truth about everything. Claire did not challenge him. "There are school records until last spring." Then Marissa withdrew her and claimed she was being educated at home. Was she no curriculum purchases, no test records, no contact with the district? Damian's jaw tightened. Claire continued. "Wade has 3 civil judgments against him, 2 gambling debts that became private, 1 assault charge from his first marriage. The charge was dismissed after the witness left the state." "Convenient. There is more?" She opened the folder wider. State support payments intended for Sophie were deposited into an account controlled by Wade. Nearly all of the money was transferred within 48 hours. "To whom we are tracing it." Damian looked toward Luke's office upstairs. "How long, Damian?" "How long?" Claire closed the folder. "As long as it takes to build something no defense lawyer can tear apart." Damian leaned closer. "He put burns on a child." "I know. He locked her underground." "I know. He planned to sell her." Claire's voice did not rise. "And if you act before we have proof, he will say she invented everything. He will say you manipulated her. He will say a criminal kidnapped a vulnerable child." Damian's expression hardened. Claire stepped closer. "You know exactly how that story will sound to people who want to believe him." Damian looked toward Sophie. Hank had placed a small bowl of grated cheese in front of her. She was asking why one kind melted faster than another. "Then find the proof," Damian said. Claire's gaze held his. "We are." For 19 days, Wade did not appear. Sophie began to move through Nocturne as if the building might keep her. Not fully, not yet. But she no longer stopped at every doorway. She left June on the kitchen counter for several minutes while washing flour from her hands. She asked Claire for another pencil without apologizing. She allowed Luke to walk beside her in the corridor without watching his hands. At night, she still slept near the wall. Some mornings, Damian found crumbs beneath her pillow. He never mentioned them. On the 20th night, Nocturne was full. Snow had stopped, but the cold remained deep enough to turn the river black beneath the city lights. The dining room glowed with candlelight and low conversation. A jazz trio played near the back wall. Damian stood in his office reviewing figures he had already read twice. Claire entered without knocking. She only did that when something was wrong. He looked up. Her face was composed, but her eyes were not. "What?" "He is downstairs." Damian stood. "Where is Sophie?" "In the kitchen. Did she see him?" "I do not know." A crash sounded below them. not loud enough to carry into the dining room, loud enough for Damian. He moved toward the door. Claire caught his arm. "Do not go to him angry." Damian looked down at her hand. "Remove it." "No." His gaze lifted to her face. Claire did not release him. "If you make a scene, Sophie will hear it. He walked into my building. He wants you to react." Damian's voice became quiet. "He will get a reaction, not the one he wants." For several seconds, neither moved. Then Damian stepped back. Claire released his arm. They descended together. In the kitchen, a ceramic plate lay broken across the tile. Sophie stood on the stool, frozen. Her hands hung at her sides. Her face had lost all color. Hank was speaking to her, but she did not seem to hear him. "Sophie." Nothing. He looked through the small glass panel in the kitchen door. A man stood near the host desk. Tall, thin, hair combed neatly away from his face. Gray suit, expensive tie worn slightly too tight. Wade Kessler smiled at the young hostess as he placed several folded papers on the stand. Hank looked back at Sophie. Her lips moved. "He found me." Hank crossed the space between them. "Kiddo, look at me." Her eyes stayed fixed on the door. "He found me." Hank lifted her from the stool. She did not fight him. Her body had gone rigid. He carried her toward the dry storage room. Luke entered through the service corridor. Hank pointed toward the front. "It is him." Luke's face changed. He looked at Sophie in Hank's arms. "Take her upstairs." "No," Sophie whispered. Hank stopped. "No stairs." "You are safe," he said. "He will see me." "He will not. He always sees." Luke crouched in front of her but kept his distance. "Use the back staircase." Sophie shook her head. "Too small." Hank looked at him. Luke understood. "Storage room," he said. "Door stays open." Hank carried Sophie inside. Luke positioned himself where she could see him from the doorway. Then Damian entered the kitchen. Sophie saw him. For 1 second, relief crossed her face. Then fear returned. "He came for me." Damian stopped several feet away. "I know. You said he could not. I said he would not take you." Her eyes filled. "What if he has papers?" Claire entered behind Damian. "He does." Sophie looked at her. Claire continued. "Papers can lie." Sophie's breathing became faster. "He told everyone I lie." Claire knelt. "I know. Do you believe him?" "No." Does Damian's voice came from behind her. "No." Sophie looked toward the dining room. "What if everyone else does?" Claire held out one hand. "Then they are wrong." Hank lowered Sophie onto an overturned crate in the storage room. She pulled June against her chest. Damian looked at Luke. "Stay with her." Luke nodded. Damian turned toward the dining room. Sophie's voice stopped him. "Do not make him mad." Damian looked back. Her face was tight with terror. "He gets worse when people embarrass him." Damian stood very still. Claire stepped beside him. "She needs to see you come back calm." His eyes remained on Sophie. Then he nodded. The dining room sensed Damian before he reached the host stand. Conversation thinned. A waiter moved aside. The jazz trio continued playing, though the pianist missed a note. Wade turned. His smile widened as Damian approached. "Mr. Cross." Damian stopped in front of him. Wade extended his hand. Damian looked at it. Wade lowered it slowly. "I apologize for arriving without notice." "No, you do not." Wade gave a soft laugh. "I understand how this appears. You do not." "I am trying to recover my niece." Claire joined Damian. Wade looked at her. "And you are?" "Claire Monroe." Recognition moved behind his eyes. The attorney. Former prosecutor. Wade smiled again. That explains the expression. Claire looked at the papers on the host stand. Guardianship documents. A photocopy of Sophie's birth certificate. A school photograph taken before the weight had disappeared from her face. Wade tapped the top page. I have legal custody. Claire did not touch it. You are not Sophie's guardian. My wife is. I act on her behalf. Where is Marissa? At home. Sick with worry. Claire watched his face. Then she can speak to the court. Wade's smile thinned. This does not require court. Damian spoke. It does now. Wade turned toward him. I am sure you believed you were helping. Sophie has always had a dramatic imagination. The air around Damian changed. Claire felt it. She lies when she is upset. Wade continued. She creates stories, bruises herself, refuses food, runs away whenever she is disciplined. Damian's voice was low. Children do not burn themselves with cigarettes. Wade did not blink. She was playing with a lighter. She has scars across her back. Children fall. In parallel lines, the smile finally left Wade's face. Guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Wade looked around the room. This is a private family matter. Damian stepped closer. You made it public when you walked through my door. Wade lowered his voice. You do not have authority here. Damian glanced around the dining room. Every waiter had stopped. Every security man had turned. Luke stood near the service entrance. Hank was visible through the kitchen window. Claire remained at Damian's side. This is the only place in Chicago where I always have authority, Damian said. Wade's jaw tightened. She belongs with us. Damian repeated the word. Belongs. You know what I mean. No, explain it. Wade glanced toward Claire. She is a child. She needs structure. You locked her in a basement. Wade's face sharpened. You have been speaking to her. She spoke when she was ready. You have no idea what that child is like. Damian's voice became quieter. I know what she is like when she thinks a bowl might break. Wade said nothing. I know how she walks through rooms because she believes footsteps can make men angry. I know she saves bread because someone taught her hunger was a punishment. I know she sleeps where she can see the door. Damian leaned closer. You taught her all of that. Wade's eyes hardened. I will return with police, Claire answered. Bring them. He looked at her. Bring a judge. Bring child protection. Bring your bank statements, school records, and the name of every person who received money from Sophie's support payments. Something flickered in Wade's face. Claire saw it. So did Damian. Wade gathered the papers. You people think money lets you keep anything. Damian looked at him. No. Wade tucked the documents beneath one arm. You cannot hide her forever. I am not hiding her. She is mine. Luke moved before Damian did. He appeared beside Wade and placed one hand near his shoulder without touching him. You are leaving. Wade looked at Luke, then at Damian. You should ask her what happens when she makes people tired. Damian's face emptied. Wade smiled once more. She always comes back. Luke guided him toward the front doors. Before Wade stepped outside, he turned. His eyes found the service corridor. For a second, Damian thought he had seen Sophie. Then Wade looked back at him. You will understand when she becomes too much. The door closed. Damian stood beneath the chandelier. Claire touched his wrist. He looked down. You came back calm, she said. His hand remained closed. Barely. But you did. They returned to the kitchen. Sophie sat on the floor in the storage room with her knees against her chest. June was crushed beneath her chin. She repeated the same words. He found me. He found me. Luke crouched near the doorway. Hank stood behind her, helpless anger burning across his face. Damian lowered himself onto the concrete floor. Sophie. She did not respond. He found me. Sophie. Her eyes lifted. The fear in them was not wild. It was resigned. He always comes back. He left. He will bring people. He might. He will bring police. Then Claire will speak to them. He has papers. Papers do not erase scars. Her lips trembled. Everybody says no until they give me back. Damian held his hand open on the floor between them. I am not giving you back. She looked at his palm. You will get tired. No. You do not know. I do. What if I break something? It gets replaced. What if I scream? I sit with you. What if I make Claire mad? Claire sat beside Damian. Then we talk. Sophie looked at Hank. What if I ruin the kitchen? Hank folded his arms. You have seen my kitchen. You would need years. A small breath left Sophie. Damian moved his hand a little closer. She stared at it. Then she crossed the space between them in a rush. Her arms wrapped around his neck. Damian held her. This time the crying came loudly. Not the silent tears she hid in her sleeve. Not the broken breaths she swallowed in the night. Her body shook with every sound. Damian remained on the floor until the storm passed through her. Claire watched him close his eyes against Sophie's hair. Hank turned away and wiped his face with the edge of his apron. Luke looked toward the kitchen door, giving her privacy. Later that night, Sophie slept in the room upstairs with every lamp turned on. Claire sat beside the bed. Damian stood near the window. Sophie's hand rested outside the blanket, fingers curled as if still holding something. Claire looked at him. You should go downstairs. No, she's asleep. She was asleep before. Claire lowered her voice. You cannot stay beside her every minute. I can tonight. The answer left no room for argument. Claire stood. Damian looked at her. You are leaving. I am going to find out why Wade looked afraid when I mentioned the payments. She crossed toward the door. Damian caught her hand. Claire stopped. His grip was firm but careful. Do not go alone. She looked at their hands, then at him. I know how to investigate a bank transfer. He knows your name now. He knew your name before. That is different. Because I stood beside you. Yes. Claire studied his face. You cannot put me behind glass every time someone threatens you. I can try. That is not romantic. The word surprised both of them. Damian's thumb moved once against the back of her hand. Claire did not pull away. No, he said. It is not. They stood close enough to hear Sophie breathing. Claire's voice softened. Let go. Damian released her. She opened the door, then looked back. I will take Luke. Damian nodded. Claire left. By morning, Luke had a file thick enough to change the shape of the case. Wade Kessler owed money to 3 private gambling operators in Wisconsin and Illinois. 2 had connections to men who moved stolen vehicles and false documents. 1 had been investigated for transporting women across state lines. Wade had also made several calls to a prepaid phone registered under a false name. Luke's people traced the phone to a man in Joliet named Eric Sloan. Sloan had no formal employment. He did have a sealed juvenile record, 2 dismissed kidnapping complaints, and regular transfers from accounts linked to illegal escort businesses. Damian read the report in his office. Claire stood near the window. This is not enough. It is enough to know what he planned, not enough to prove it. Luke placed another sheet on the desk. There is a message from Wade to Sloan 3 weeks ago. Damian read it. Girl is 7, blonde, small, no paperwork problem if moved fast. The room went silent. Claire's face hardened. Where did you get this? One of Sloane's old phones was still syncing to a cloud account. Can it be authenticated? Yes. Then we have conspiracy. Luke shook his head. We have language that could mean something else if a lawyer wants it to. Damian looked at him. What else? Sloane asked for photographs. Wade sent one. Luke placed a printed image on the desk. It showed Sophie asleep on a sofa, thinner, bruised, unaware. Damian looked at the date. 2 months earlier. Claire covered her mouth briefly. The next message had come from Sloane. Face is usable. Keep it that way. Damian rose. Claire moved between him and the door. No. Move. No. He sent photographs of her. I can read. He priced her. I know. Damian's eyes were nearly black. Claire held her ground. You go after him now and we lose the people behind him. I do not care. Yes, you do. I care about Sophie, then care about the other children these men may already have. The words stopped him. Claire took a breath. We watch Wade. We watch Sloane. We let them believe they still have room to move. Damian stared at her. You are asking me to use Sophie as bait. No, that is what this becomes. She never leaves protected space. She already did. We increase security. He came through my front door and walked out because he had no proof she was here. He saw the fear on everyone's faces. Claire lowered her voice. He saw anger. Not Sophie. Damian looked toward the photograph on the desk. I want 2 men on her at all times. Quietly. 4 outside. 2. 3. Claire nodded. 3. Luke watched them. Are you finished negotiating over my staff? No, they said at the same time. For 4 days, Wade did nothing. The silence became its own pressure. Sophie stayed closer to Damian. She brought books into his office and sat near the window while he worked. She no longer asked permission every time she entered, though she still paused at the door. At night, she returned to the corner beside the bed. Her red boots remained close enough to reach. On the 5th afternoon, Hank asked to take her outside. She has not seen the sky without glass in 3 weeks. Damian looked at him. No. Sophie sat at the kitchen table drawing. She did not look up. Hank lowered his voice. She is starting to believe safety means never leaving a building. Claire stood beside Damian. She needs air. She needs to stay alive. She can have both. Luke had already inspected a small waterfront park 2 blocks away. 2 security men could watch from a parked sedan. Another could stay near the path. Damian looked at Sophie. She was coloring a house with yellow windows. 30 minutes, he said. Hank nodded. No crowds. Fine. Luke chooses the route. I know how streets work. Humor me. Hank looked toward Sophie. This man thinks he invented sidewalks. Sophie smiled. The park was nearly empty. Snow covered the grass in a thin white layer. Ice clung to the railing beside the river. The sky was pale and flat above the buildings. Sophie wore her red coat, her boots, knit gloves, and the cream hat Claire had bought. Hank carried coffee in one hand and a paper bag of roasted chestnuts in the other. Luke's men watched from separate positions. One sat inside a dark sedan near the corner. Another pretended to read on a bench. A third walked a dog that did not belong to him. Sophie pointed toward a gull standing on the railing. Why is that bird bigger than the others? Confidence, Hank said. That does not make birds bigger. It makes men think they are. She watched a pigeon approach the gull. The gull snapped its beak. The pigeon retreated. "Maybe you are right." Hank handed her a chestnut. She held it in both gloves. Then the black van turned onto the street. It moved too fast. The driver cut across the lane, mounted the curb, and sent slush across the path. Hank dropped the coffee. He shoved Sophie behind him. The side door opened. 2 men jumped out. One rushed toward Sophie. Hank swung first. His fist struck the man's jaw. The second attacker drove a shoulder into Hank's stomach. Air left him. He fell hard against the frozen ground. Sophie screamed. The first man recovered and reached for her. His hand closed around the front of her red coat. She fought without sound. Her body remembered being quiet. Then she saw the open van door. Something broke through the silence. No. She kicked. The red boot struck his knee. He cursed and tightened his grip. Luke's men moved from 3 directions. The man on the bench reached them first. He caught the attacker around the throat and dragged him backward. The second security man slammed Hank's attacker against the side of the van. Metal bent beneath the impact. The dog barked wildly from the end of its borrowed leash. Sophie fell into the snow. June landed several feet away. She crawled toward the fox. Luke's car stopped near the curb. He was out before the engine settled. He reached Sophie and dropped to one knee. "Sophie." She clutched June against her chest. Her teeth struck together. "They tried to take me." Luke kept his hands open. "They did not. They touched me. I know. They opened the van. I know." Hank pushed himself upright. Blood ran from his lip. "Check her." Luke looked at him. "You are hurt. I have been hurt by better men." One of the guards took a phone from the first attacker. A message appeared across the screen. He read it once. Then his face changed. "Luke." Luke took the phone. The message had arrived from a number already linked to Wade Kessler. "Take the girl. Keep her face clean. Buyer pays less for damage." Luke looked toward Sophie. Her red coat was bright against the snow. He called Damian. Damian answered before the second ring. "Report." They moved. Damian said nothing. 2 men. Black van. Sophie is safe. And Hank bruised. Angry. "I am fine," Hank shouted. Luke looked at the phone. "We have a message from Wade. Read it." Luke did. The wind moved across the park. Damian's voice returned quietly. "Bring them in." Luke ended the call. Sophie stared at him, where Luke looked toward the van, then at Hank. Back to Nocturne. Sophie's hand reached for Hank. He crouched with a wince. "You are safe, kiddo. I'm sorry." Hank's face changed. "No." She looked at him. "Not one more sorry today." He opened his arms. Sophie moved into them. Hank held her against his chest while Luke's men secured the attackers. When they reached Nocturne, Damian was waiting in the 3rd-floor corridor. He wore no coat, no gloves, only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. Sophie saw him and pulled free from Hank. She ran. Damian caught her against his chest. Her arms wrapped around his neck. They came back. "I know. They tried to put me in the van. They failed." Her face pressed into his shoulder. "Because Luke was there." "Yes." "And Hank." "Yes." She lifted her head. "Were you there?" Damian looked at her. "No." The answer hurt her. He saw it. "But I am here now." Sophie held his face between both small hands as if checking whether he was real. "Do not go." Damian looked past her at Claire. She stood near the stairwell with the message printed in her hand. Her face told him she already knew what he intended. Damian carried Sophie into the suite. Claire followed. Luke remained in the corridor. After Sophie was under the blankets, she closed one hand around Damian's wrist. He sat beside the bed. "Stay until I sleep." "I will." Her eyes closed slowly. Even after sleep came, her fingers kept moving against his skin. Claire waited near the door. When Damian finally eased his hand free, he stood and crossed toward her. She held up the printed message. "We have enough for an arrest." "Not enough. It is direct evidence. Wade hired men. He named a buyer. Damian. He will say the phone was stolen. We have the attackers. They will say they do not know him. We have photographs. We need him to speak." Claire's eyes narrowed. "What are you planning?" Damian opened the door. Luke waited outside. "Bring the men to the warehouse." Claire stepped into the corridor. "Damian." He looked at her. They put their hands on her. "I know. They called her merchandise." "I know." His voice lowered. "I want Wade breathing when he understands what he did." Claire moved between him and the stairs, and after that, Damian said nothing. "What happens when Sophie wakes up and asks where you are?" His face remained still. Claire held the message between them. "She needs a man who comes back." Damian looked toward the closed suite door, then toward the stairs leading down into the city he controlled. For the first time in 22 years, revenge and protection stood in opposite directions. Damian reached for his coat. Claire did not move. "Choose carefully," she said. His hand closed around the fabric. Claire remained between him and the stairs. For several seconds, Damian did not move. Behind the suite door, Sophie slept beneath warm blankets with one hand curled near her face. Downstairs, 2 men waited in a locked room beneath the restaurant. Across the city, Wade Kessler believed distance and legal papers could still protect him. Damian looked at Claire. "What do you want me to do?" The question came quietly. Claire understood what it cost him to ask. "Use everything you have," she said, "but use it correctly." He tried to sell her. "I know. He sent men to drag her into a van." "I know. You keep saying that, because you keep speaking as if rage is the only proof that you love her." Damian's jaw tightened. Claire stepped closer. "I am not asking you to forgive him. I could not. I am asking you to make sure he never hurts another child." Damian glanced toward the closed suite door. Claire lowered the page containing Wade's message. "We need his voice. We need the attackers to identify him. We need the buyer. We need the accounts he used. We need Marissa." Marissa watched him hurt Sophie. "Yes, she does not deserve protection." "No, but she may have evidence." Damian looked toward Luke. "Find her." Luke took out his phone. Claire continued. "The men downstairs can tell us where they were supposed to take Sophie. If they speak, they will." Damian's eyes moved to Luke. Luke gave a small nod. Claire noticed. No broken bones. Luke looked at her. "I did not say anything." "You did not need to." Damian finally released the coat. He looked at Claire for a long moment. "You believe this will be enough. I believe it can become enough. That is not the same thing." "No," she said. "It is not." Claire folded Wade's message and placed it in the file. "But if you kill him tonight, Sophie spends the rest of her life wondering whether the man who promised to stay disappeared because of her." Damian looked away. "She would not know. She would know you were gone." The corridor became silent. Claire's voice softened. "You told her people are not replaceable." His eyes returned to hers. "So do not make yourself one more person she loses." Damian stood very still. Then he handed the coat to Luke. "Bring the men to the warehouse." Claire's expression sharpened. Damian continued before she could object. "They speak. They are recorded. No one touches them unless they force the issue." Luke nodded. "And Wade?" he asked. Damian looked toward the stairwell. "Find Marissa first." Luke left. Claire remained beside Damian. "You listened. Do not sound surprised. I am trying not to." He looked at her. "You are failing." For the first time since the attack, something almost warm passed between them. It vanished when Sophie made a small sound behind the door. Damian turned immediately. Claire caught his hand before he reached the handle. "She is asleep." He looked down at their joined hands. Claire did not release him. "You can go downstairs," she said. "I will stay with her." Damian's expression closed. "That is not what she asked. She asked you to stay until she slept. She may wake." "She may." Damian looked toward the door. Claire stepped closer. "If she wakes, I will tell her where you are. I will tell her you are coming back." He looked at Claire. "Will you, yes?" The answer settled something in him. Not completely. Enough. He nodded once. Claire released his hand. Damian walked toward the stairs. At the landing, he stopped. "Claire." She looked at him. "Lock the door. From the inside." He held her gaze for another second, then disappeared down the stairwell. The two men from the park were waiting in a storage room beneath Nocturne. One had a swollen jaw. The other held his ribs and tried not to breathe deeply. Luke stood near the door. A camera rested on a shelf in the corner, recording both men. Damian entered. Neither man looked directly at him. He placed the stolen phone on the table between them. "Who hired you?" The larger man stared at the floor. Damian sat down across from him. "I am going to ask once." No one spoke. Damian folded his hands. "You drove onto a public path in daylight. You attempted to abduct a 7-year-old child. There are cameras, witnesses, messages, and 3 men who can identify both of you." The smaller attacker shifted in his chair. Damian looked at him. "Wade Kessler hired you." The man's eyes moved slightly. That was enough. Damian continued. "You were supposed to deliver Sophie to someone else." The larger man finally spoke. "We do not know anything about a kid." Luke placed a photograph on the table. It showed the attacker's hand gripping Sophie's red coat. The man looked away. Damian leaned forward. "The police will find the message. They will find the van. They will find the money. They will ask whether you knew what was going to happen to her." Neither man answered. Damian's voice lowered. "Then they will ask whether you helped them find the other children." The smaller man looked up. "What other children?" Damian watched his face. "You tell me." The man swallowed. Luke placed another paper on the table. It contained a list of calls between Wade and Eric Sloan. The smaller attacker read the name. His face changed. Damian saw it. "You know Sloan." The man looked toward his partner. The larger man shook his head once. Damian did not miss it. He looked at Luke. "Leave us." Luke remained still. Damian met his eyes. "I said no one touches them." Luke understood. He left the room and closed the door. Damian sat across from the 2 men alone. "You believe Wade can protect you." The smaller man laughed nervously. "We do not work for Wade." "No. You work for anyone who pays." Damian looked at the larger man. $3,000 before the job. 3 after delivery. The man's eyes narrowed. Damian had guessed. The reaction confirmed it. "You were told she was a runaway," Damian said. The smaller man looked down. "You were told her guardian wanted her back." Silence. "Then you saw the message about keeping her face clean." The larger man shifted. Damian placed both palms on the table. "You knew." The smaller man's voice came out low. "We were only taking her to a house where no answer." Damian looked toward the camera. "When this recording reaches federal investigators, they will hear your silence." The smaller man looked at his partner. The larger man spoke through clenched teeth. "Shut up." Damian leaned back. "You can be the man who drove a child to a buyer or the man who helped identify him." The smaller attacker breathed faster. It was a house near Joliet. The larger man turned toward him. "You idiot." Damian did not react. Address. I do not know the number. Street. Something near the old quarry. Sloane was supposed to call once we had her. Did you transport anyone before Sophie? The man looked at the camera. Damian waited. 2 girls. The words entered the room and stayed there. Damian's face became still. When one last summer, one before Christmas. Ages I do not know. Guess, 12, maybe 13. The larger man pushed against the table. We are done. Damian looked at him. No. You are beginning. The door opened. Luke stepped inside with his phone. We found Marissa. Damian rose. We're a motel outside Milwaukee. She checked in under her mother's name. Bring Claire. Luke looked at the attackers. What about them? Keep recording. The motel stood beside a highway where trucks moved through the darkness without slowing. Claire arrived with Luke shortly before dawn. Damian waited in the car across the parking lot. Claire looked at him. You are not coming inside. She may be dangerous. She is frightened. Frightened people are dangerous. So are angry ones. Damian looked toward the second floor. A light glowed behind faded curtains. Claire opened the car door. Give me 20 minutes. 10, 15. He said nothing. Claire stepped out. Luke followed her to the stairwell but stopped outside the room. Claire knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Marissa Hale. A shadow moved behind the curtain. Claire kept her hands visible. My name is Claire Monroe. I am here because Sophie is alive. The lock turned. The door opened a few inches. Marissa looked older than the photograph in the guardianship file. Her hair was unwashed. A bruise darkened one side of her jaw. Her eyes moved past Claire toward Luke. Who is he? He stays outside. Marissa began to close the door. Claire spoke quickly. Wade tried to have Sophie taken yesterday. The door stopped. Marissa looked at her. Is she hurt? No. Where is she? Safe. Marissa closed her eyes. Claire saw relief, then shame. May I come in? Marissa looked toward Luke again. Claire turned. Stay here. Luke did not like the order. Claire entered the room and closed the door behind her. The motel smelled of old smoke and cleaning chemicals. A suitcase lay open on the bed. Clothes had been pushed inside without folding. A bottle of water sat beside several unpaid bills. Marissa remained near the window. Wade said someone took her. No one took her. He said she ran because she was unstable. She ran because she heard him discussing a buyer. Marissa's face emptied. Claire watched her. You knew. Marissa sat on the edge of the bed. I did not know it was real. You heard him. He said things when he was drinking. You knew. Marissa covered her mouth. Claire did not soften the question. Did you see him hit Sophie? Yes. Did you see the burns? Marissa nodded. Did you treat them? Yes. Did you take her to a doctor? No. Did you call the police? Marissa shook her head. Claire sat in the chair opposite the bed. Why? He said he would kill me. And Sophie. Marissa began to cry. Claire waited. He said if I left, he would find us. He knew where my sister lived. He knew where I worked. He took my money. Sophie was 7. I know. No, you know now because she escaped. Did you know while you told her to be careful? Marissa looked down. Yes. Claire placed a recorder on the table. Marissa stared at it. I am not here to tell you that fear made what you did acceptable. I loved her. You failed her. Marissa flinched. Claire continued. Both can be true. The room became quiet except for the trucks passing outside. Marissa wiped her face. What do you want? The truth. What happens to me I do not know. Will I go to prison? possibly. Marissa looked toward the suitcase. Claire leaned forward. Wade will blame you. He will say you handled the money. He will say you invented the abuse. He will say Sophie was difficult and you asked him to control her. Marissa looked frightened. Would he? You know he would. She nodded slowly. Claire turned on the recorder. Then speak before he does. Marissa described everything. She described the first bruise, the first night Wade locked Sophie in the basement, the excuses she made to teachers, the false home education forms, the checks Wade took, the photograph he forced her to take while Sophie slept, the conversations about a man named Sloan. She admitted hearing Wade say that younger girls brought more money. Her voice broke when she described the final night. Sophie was upstairs, Marissa said. I knew she could hear us. Why did you not stop her from leaving? Marissa looked at Claire. I saw the basement window open. Claire remained silent. I knew she had climbed out. You let her go. I did not know where she would go. But you did not call Wade. No. Why? Marissa's tears returned. Because leaving alone was safer than staying with us. Claire stopped the recording. Marissa looked toward the device. Will Sophie know I helped? She will know the truth. Will she forgive me? Claire stood. That is not something you are allowed to ask from her. Outside, dawn had begun to lighten the sky. Damian waited beside the car. Claire walked toward him carrying the recorder and signed statement. She knew he said. Yes. She let it happen. Yes. Damian looked toward the motel room. Do you want me to bring her? No. His eyes moved to Claire. She cooperated. She is also evidence. That is not why. Claire opened the passenger door. She made a terrible choice every day for nearly 2 years. Last night she made a different one. Damian looked toward the window again. She does not get to become brave after Sophie escaped. No. Claire sat in the car. But Sophie deserves the full truth. Damian entered the driver's side. He looked at the statement in Claire's hands. Do we have enough? We have enough to arrest Wade. And Sloan. Not yet. Damian started the engine. Then Wade speaks. By noon, Luke knew where Wade was. He had gone to a private card room on the edge of Cicero, trying to borrow money from men who had already decided he was a liability. Damian's people collected him in the parking lot. There was no public scene, no weapons displayed. A black car pulled alongside him. Luke stepped out. Wade looked around, understood the arrangement, and entered without resistance. He arrived at the warehouse shortly after sunset. A single work light hung above a metal table. Wade sat with his hands free. Luke stood near the door. Claire waited behind a glass partition in the office above the floor. She had argued against coming. Damian had refused to let her remain at Nocturne without him. Now she watched as Damian entered the warehouse. Wade smiled. It was the same smile he had worn at the restaurant. You are making a serious mistake. Damian placed the phone on the table. Wade's eyes moved toward it. The smile remained. I do not know what that is. Damian placed photographs beside the phone. Sophie's bruises, the basement window, the image Wade sent to Sloan, bank transfers, messages, Marissa's statement. Wade looked at the final page. His expression changed. Marissa is unstable. She spoke for 2 hours. She lies. So does Sophie. Yes. The attackers. Wade's gaze shifted. Damian placed a photograph of the 2 men on the table. They identified you. They will say anything. They gave us the house near Joliet. For the first time, Wade stopped performing. Damian sat down across from him. Who is Eric Sloan? Wade said nothing. Who bought the other girls? I do not know anything about other girls. Damian leaned forward. You taught Sophie to be afraid of footsteps. Wade looked at him. You taught her to sleep with a wall behind her. You taught her to hide bread. You taught her to believe mistakes made pain reasonable. Wade's mouth tightened. You think buying her clothes makes you her father? Damian's expression did not change. No. She is damaged. Luke's hands closed at his sides. Wade continued. She will wake screaming. She will steal from you. She will lie. She will watch you every second because she cannot help herself. Damian stood slowly. Wade smiled. There it is. Damian moved around the table. You thought you wanted her, Wade said. You wanted the grateful version, the quiet little victim who makes you feel important. Damian stopped beside him. You do not know what I want. I know men. Wade leaned back. She will become work. Then she will become a burden. Damian grabbed him by the front of his shirt and pulled him from the chair. The table struck the floor. Luke did not move. Damian drove Wade against a steel support beam. Wade gasped. Damian's hand closed around his throat. The warehouse disappeared. He saw Sophie in the snow. He saw the marks on her back. He saw Lila's hand slipping from his. Wade struggled beneath his grip. You think she loves you? He forced out. Damian tightened his hand. Above the warehouse floor, Claire opened the office door. Damian. He heard her. He did not release Wade. Claire descended the metal stairs. Luke watched her approach. She needs you alive, Claire said. Damian's eyes remained on Wade. She needs him gone. She needs you to come home. Wade's face had begun to darken. Claire stopped several feet away. If you kill him, he still decides what kind of man you become. Damian's arm trembled with restraint. Claire stepped closer. Sophie did not ask you to avenge her. Wade clawed at Damian's wrist. Claire's voice softened. She asked you to stay. Damian looked at her. The warehouse became silent. Claire held his gaze. Choose her. Damian released Wade. He collapsed onto the concrete, coughing and dragging air into his lungs. Damian stepped back. His hands shook once, then became still. Luke moved forward and pulled Wade into the chair. Wade stared at Damian with hatred. You think this makes you good? Damian looked down at him. No. He returned to the table and placed a recorder beside the phone. It makes you alive long enough to speak. Luke set down photographs of the house near Joliet. Damian pressed the record button. Give me Sloan. Wade remained silent. Damian looked toward Claire. She placed Marissa's signed statement on the table. Federal investigators already have copies, she said. Wade stared at her. Your accounts are frozen. Your messages are preserved. The two men from the park are cooperating. Marissa is testifying. Wade's face changed. Claire continued. Sloan believes you are going to blame him. He is preparing to blame you first. It was not true. Not yet. Wade believed it. His eyes moved between them. Damian sat down. You have one chance to become useful. Wade spoke for 43 minutes. He gave them Sloan's address, the location of the Joliet house, 3 account numbers, 2 names Claire had not heard before, a storage facility where documents and photographs were kept. He admitted arranging Sophie's abduction. He admitted knowing what Sloan intended. He tried to minimize everything. The recorder captured every word. When he finished, Luke secured his hands. Wade looked at Damian. What happens now? Damian stood. Daylight. Federal vehicles waited inside a public parking structure near the courthouse. Claire had chosen the location. Cameras covered every entrance. Investigators took custody of Wade, the attackers, the phones, the financial records, and the recordings. At the same hour, another team entered the house near Joliet. They found no children there. They found restraints, false identification documents, Photographs, clothing, and evidence connecting Sloane to 2 missing girls. Sloane was arrested before midnight. Marissa surrendered the following morning. Damian watched Wade being placed inside an official vehicle. Luke stood beside him. "You satisfied, no? You expected to be." Damian looked toward Claire. She was speaking with an investigator beneath the white lights of the garage. "No." Luke followed his gaze. "That is complicated." Damian looked at him. Luke raised both hands. I said nothing. They returned to Nocturne before sunrise. Sophie was awake. She sat at the kitchen table with June in her lap and a cup of warm milk between her hands. Hank stood near the stove. The moment Sophie saw Damian, her shoulders lowered. "You came back." He removed his coat. "I said I would." Claire sat beside Sophie. "We need to tell you something." Sophie's fingers tightened around the cup. "Is Wade here?" "No," Damian said. "Did he get away?" "No." Claire spoke carefully. "The police have him. They also have the men who tried to take you." Sophie looked at Damian. "Did you hurt him?" The question entered him more deeply than he expected. Damian sat across from her. "I almost did." Claire watched him. Sophie's eyes moved over his face. "What stopped you?" "You. I was here." "I know." She looked confused. Damian leaned forward. "I remembered that I promised to come back." Sophie considered this. "Is Aunt Marissa with him?" Claire answered. "She spoke to us. She told the truth about what happened. Is she going to jail?" "She may." Sophie looked down at June. She was scared too. "Yes," Claire said. "Does that mean it was not her fault?" Claire waited before answering. "No. Fear explains why she made some choices. It does not make those choices harmless." Sophie's eyes filled. "She loved me." "She may have," Claire said, but she did not help. "No." Sophie rubbed June's torn ear. "Can both things be true?" Damian looked toward Claire. Claire nodded. "Yes." Sophie remained silent for a long time. "Do I have to forgive her?" "No," Damian said. "Can I later, if you choose?" She looked at him. "Do I have to choose now?" "No." The answer seemed to release something inside her. She lifted the cup and took a small drink. Then she asked, "Can I stay at Nocturne?" Damian looked at Claire. Claire looked back. He answered carefully, "For now." Sophie's face tightened. Damian continued, "I want to ask the court if you can stay with me permanently." Her eyes widened. "Permanently means forever." "Yes." "What if they say no?" Claire placed one hand near Sophie's on the table. "Then we continue fighting." Sophie looked at Damian. "Do you want me to be your daughter?" The room became still. Damian did not look away. "Yes." "Even when I scream?" "Yes." "Even when I hide food?" "Yes." "Even when I do bad things?" "You are allowed to make mistakes." Her lips trembled. Why Damian's voice became rough. "Because you are a child." Sophie lowered her head. A tear fell into the milk. Damian moved around the table and knelt beside her. She leaned into him. Hank turned toward the stove. Claire watched Damian hold her. Later, Sophie fell asleep on the sofa in Claire's office. June rested beneath her chin. Damian stood near the window while Claire organized the legal papers. "I want guardianship," he said. Claire did not look up. "I know. I want adoption." Her hands stopped. "That is different." "I know." Claire closed the file. "They will investigate everything. Let them. Your businesses. Yes, your associates. Yes, your history. Damian looked through the glass at Sophie. Yes, they may decide Nocturne is not a suitable home. Then I will buy another one. Claire almost smiled. They may decide your life is too dangerous. Then I will change it. She studied him. You cannot say that lightly. I am not. You spent 20 years building your organization. I spent 20 years making sure no one could take anything from me. Damian looked at Sophie. It did not teach me how to keep someone. Claire's expression softened. Legal guardianship will require patience. I have some. Very little. I can purchase more. That is not how patience works. It should be. Claire shook her head. Damian stepped closer. Help me. She looked up at him. You keep asking me to help you build a life I would have to stand outside. Damian's expression changed. Claire turned away and gathered the papers. He caught her wrist gently. She stopped. What does that mean? He asked. Claire looked at his hand. You know what it means. No. Her eyes lifted. It means I have stood beside you for 8 years while you let me become essential to every part of your life except the part that mattered. Damian released her wrist. Claire continued. I know your enemies. I know your accounts. I know which nights you do not sleep. I know what happened to Lila. I know how you take your coffee and why you never sit with your back to a window. Her voice became quieter. But I do not know whether you see me when there is no crisis to solve. Damian looked at her. I see you. That is not enough. He crossed the remaining distance between them. What is Claire's breath changed? The truth. Damian looked toward the sleeping child, then back at Claire. The truth is that when Sophie wakes, she searches for me. Claire remained still. And when I do not know what to do for her, I search for you. Her eyes softened. Damian lifted one hand and touched her face. The truth is that I have wanted you for years. Claire's lips parted. And I thought wanting you would give my enemies another way to hurt me. Claire looked at him. You should not have made that choice for me. No. The apology came without defense. Claire heard it. Damian's thumb moved along her cheek. I do not want you outside the life I build. What do you want you? The word held no command, no threat, only truth. Claire stepped closer. Their first kiss was quiet. It carried years of restrained arguments, unfinished glances, and rooms where they had stood too close without touching. Damian's hand settled at the back of her neck. Claire's fingers closed around the front of his shirt. When they separated, neither moved far. A sleepy voice came from the sofa. Are you finished? Claire closed her eyes. Damian looked over her shoulder. Sophie watched them beneath the blanket. Were you awake? Claire asked. No. Damian's mouth shifted. Sophie sat up. You were being strange. Claire adjusted her blouse. Go back to sleep. Sophie looked at Damian. Is Claire staying too? He looked at Claire. She held his gaze. Yes, Damian said. Sophie lay down again. Good. She closed her eyes and pulled the blanket beneath her chin. Damian stood beside Claire in the dim office. For the first time, the promise of a family did not feel like another vow made in anger. It felt like a door opening, not a dramatic one. No thunder, no applause, no sudden promise that everything behind them had vanished. Just a quiet change in the air. A year earlier, Damian would have called it weakness. Now he understood that some doors required more courage to walk through than any room filled with armed men. The legal process began 3 days later. Claire filed for emergency guardianship. Maya submitted medical records. Luke delivered security footage, statements, financial evidence, and every piece of documentation connected to Wade Kessler. The court granted temporary protection while the investigation continued. Sophie did not understand all of it. She understood one thing. No one was coming to take her that night. Damian bought a house in Lincoln Park before the end of the month. It stood on a quiet street behind iron gates, though Claire made him remove the spikes from the top. "It looks like a prison," she said. "It looks secure. It looks like you expect an invasion." "I usually do." Claire folded her arms. "Sophie cannot learn that safety means living behind weapons." Damian looked at the gates. The next morning, the spikes were gone. The house had tall windows, warm wood floors, and a kitchen large enough for Hank to complain about every appliance. Sophie chose the bedroom facing the garden. She did not choose it because of the sunlight. She chose it because the door could remain open while she still had a clear view of the stairs. Claire helped her paint the walls a soft yellow. Luke installed locks on the windows, then showed Sophie how each one worked. "No secret locks," he told her. "You can check them whenever you want." Sophie tested every window twice. At night, she still slept in the corner. Damian never carried her to the bed. He placed a blanket near the wall and sat in the hallway until she fell asleep. Some mornings he found crackers beneath her pillow. He left fresh ones in the kitchen. Claire noticed. "You should talk to her about it. She is eating. She is preparing for hunger. I know. She needs to hear that the food will still be there." Damian looked toward the stairs. "I tell her every day." "Then tell her again." So he did. Every morning. Every night. The words slowly became part of the house. "There will be breakfast. There will be dinner. There will be more tomorrow." Healing did not move in a straight line. One afternoon, Sophie dropped a glass in the kitchen. It shattered across the floor. She froze. Damian entered at the sound. Sophie looked at the broken glass, then at him. "I didn't mean to." Damian saw the old terror return. He stopped several feet away. "Do not move. You might cut your feet." Her eyes filled. "Are you mad?" "No. You look mad. I am worried. About the glass. About you standing near it." Claire appeared with a broom. Sophie watched Damian sweep the pieces into a pan. Nothing happened. No shouting, no punishment, no locked door. That night, Sophie slept in the bed for the first time. She left one foot touching the floor. Damian stood in the doorway and watched her breathing. Claire came behind him. "She is asleep." "I know." "You have been standing here for 20 minutes." "I know." Claire slipped her hand into his. "Come downstairs." Damian looked at Sophie once more. Then he allowed Claire to lead him away. The home study began in spring. Rebecca Sloan, the assigned social worker, did not care about Damian's reputation. That made him respect her immediately. She sat across from him in the library and opened a thick file. "People are afraid of you. They have reasons. That is not reassuring. It was not intended to be." Rebecca studied him. "You cannot frighten a court into making you a father." "I know. Can you—" Damian looked toward the garden where Sophie and Claire were planting flowers. "I can learn." Rebecca followed his gaze. "What happens when she lies? I ask why. What happens when she steals food? I give her a place where she never has to steal. What happens when she says she hates you?" Damian was quiet. Then he answered, "I stay." Rebecca closed the file. That answer mattered more than any of the others. Still, Damian's life remained a problem. His name was attached to companies that had never been examined too closely. His associates included men who believed loyalty required blood. His enemies knew where he lived. Claire placed the documents in front of him one evening. "If you want permanent custody, this cannot remain your world." Damian looked at the papers. He had spent 20 years building power from fear. Warehouses, shipping routes, private security contracts. Men who followed orders because refusal had consequences. He signed away the first operation that night. The second took longer. The third nearly caused a war. Several men accepted legal positions inside new logistics and security companies. Others walked away. One threatened him. Luke handled the threat before it reached the house. Damian learned about it afterward. "You should have told me," he said. Luke looked toward the kitchen where Sophie was making pasta with Hank. "You were busy." Damian understood. For the first time, being left out of violence felt like a gift. Claire and Damian still fought, mostly because Damian continued making decisions without asking. He added more guards to the house after a strange car passed twice. Claire discovered them before dinner. "You increased security." "Yes." "You did not tell me. There was no reason to worry you. That was not your choice." Damian's expression hardened. "I was protecting you. You were controlling the environment. There was a threat. There will always be a threat if you keep treating fear like permission." Sophie stood in the hallway. Neither adult had noticed her. Claire saw her first. She lowered her voice. Damian followed her gaze. Sophie looked ready to retreat. Damian took a breath. Then he did something that would once have felt impossible. "You are right," he said. Claire looked at him. "I should have told you. I should have asked." Sophie remained in the hallway. Claire nodded. "Thank you." The argument ended. No doors slammed. No one disappeared. Sophie watched all of it. The next week, she began school. She stood outside the entrance wearing her red boots and holding June beneath one arm. Children moved past her in noisy groups. She gripped Damian's hand. "What if they ask where I lived before you decide what they are allowed to know? What if they don't like me? That would be their mistake." Claire gave him a look. Damian corrected himself. "You do not need everyone to like you. How many people, one or two good people, can change a life?" Sophie looked between him and Claire. "Like you." Claire smiled. "Like us." Sophie entered the school. Damian remained outside after the doors closed. "She returns at 3, Claire said. "I know. You are staring at the building. I am looking. You are staring." Damian looked at her. Claire kissed his cheek. "Breathe." He did, poorly. The final adoption hearing took place 11 months after Sophie entered Nocturne. Luke wore a suit that made him uncomfortable. Hank brought food, even though the courthouse prohibited it. Maya sat beside Claire. Sophie wore a dark blue dress and carried June. The judge asked Damian questions for nearly an hour. Could he provide stability? Had he separated himself from criminal activity? Could he accept professional guidance? Would he continue Sophie's therapy? Did he understand that trauma might affect her for years? Damian answered each question directly. Then the judge leaned forward. What happens if Sophie never becomes the child you imagine Damian looked toward her? Sophie sat beside Claire, holding the fox in both hands. I am not asking her to become easier to love. The courtroom became silent. The judge then asked Sophie whether she wanted to speak privately. Sophie shook her head. I can talk here. The judge smiled gently. Why do you want to live with Mr. Cross? Sophie thought carefully. He stays when I am scared. Is that all? No. She looked at Claire. Claire tells the truth even when it is bad. Then she looked back at Damian. He does too now. A quiet laugh moved through the courtroom. The judge asked, Do they make you feel safe? Sophie looked down at June's torn ear. They make me feel like I don't have to disappear. Damian lowered his eyes. Claire reached beneath the table and took his hand. The adoption was approved. Outside reporters waited behind a barrier. Luke guided everyone toward the cars. Hank complained that justice took too long and offered sandwiches to anyone willing to listen. Sophie walked beside Damian. Halfway down the courthouse steps, one of her bootlaces came loose. Damian knelt to tie it. Sophie watched him. "Dad." His hand stopped. The city continued around them. Cars moved, cameras clicked. Someone called his name. Damian heard none of it. Sophie's face became uncertain. "Was that okay?" He looked up at her. His voice came out rough. "Say it again." "Dad." Damian finished tying the lace with unsteady fingers. Then he stood and lifted her into his arms. Sophie wrapped herself around him. Claire stood beside them with tears in her eyes. Damian reached for her hand. The three of them walked toward the car together. 1 year later, Nocturne closed for a private Sunday dinner. Hank cooked. Luke lost a card game to Sophie and accused her of cheating. Claire read documents at the end of the table. Damian entered carrying a birthday cake. A nervous little girl stood near the kitchen doorway. Her mother had recently entered treatment, and Claire had arranged temporary care. The child watched the bread, Sophie noticed. She filled a plate and carried it over. The girl looked at the food. "Do I have to finish it?" Sophie shook her head. "No. Can I save some?" "There will be more." The girl looked toward the long table. "Will they be mad if I sit there?" Sophie glanced at Damian. He pulled out an empty chair. She turned back to the girl. "No. There is always room." Outside, snow began to fall over Chicago. Inside, one more place was set at the table. Sophie sat beside Damian and rested her head against his arm. "You all right?" he asked. She smiled. "I'm home."